Hello everyone! Today I'm going to be going through all the books that I read this past winter, as in December, February, that's not how months work, as in December, January, and February. I started out really bad in December, jumped really high in January, and then went back down to super bad in February. I read basically no books that month, but I did read some, and we're going to talk about those today. So let's just get started. The first and only book that I finished in December is Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. The story follows a boy named Laszlo Strange who, from the time he was a kid, was obsessed with a city called Weep, except it wasn't always called Weep. He remembers the moment when the true name vanished from his lips, from his mind, and vanished from everybody's memory, and no one remembers what the city is. And from there, he devotes his life to studying the culture and the stories of Weep, and he actually becomes a scholar in the library of this town. One day, he's afforded the opportunity to actually go to Weep, and from there, he finds out a lot more about what exactly happened to Weep, why they don't remember what the name is, and he learns about how much hate between rivaling peoples has actually plagued the city of Weep. Now, this book actually ended up being one of my favorite books of 2018. It catered to every single thing that I love in stories. It had beautiful lyrical prose. It talked about dreams and following your passions, and I was just so invested in that. This book is quite slow. There's not a lot of action, not until the very end, really. And if you are not invested in the characters, then you're probably not gonna like this book. But I found myself completely engrossed in Laszlo's stories, and also there is another perspective that I won't go into because I think it's part of the experience to not know who that person is and what their part in this story is. But I absolutely adored them as well. Another point of criticism that I could see was in how the relationship developed between the main two love interests. It was very much insta-love, but because the story had a very fairy tale-like atmosphere, it was kind of easy to suspend your disbelief and just genuinely believe that the love they had for each other was genuine. But that being said, that's a lot of depending on the type of reader you are and what you look for in a story. Not everyone can suspend their disbelief and just believe the kind of magical, fairy tale-esque atmosphere that's being created. I thought there was a lot of insight about how cultures are influenced by the hatred of people in the past and how that affects people today and how people view each other and how stories may not be what they seem depending on who's telling it. I just really loved it, and I'm really excited to finally get to the sequel, Muse of Nightmares. It's been on my shelf for a while, and hopefully soon I'll get to it. So now on to January. Now this is where the big kahuna happened. I read 6 books, largely because I was on winter break and I actually had time. The first books that I read this year were actually the Grisha trilogy by Leigh Bardugo, and I actually filmed a full review of this. It's on my channel. I have a spoiler-free section as well as a spoilery discussion if you want to watch that. I go into a lot of detail, I think. So I'll try to be brief here and just give my overall thoughts. I really enjoyed it. I had so much fun with this series. It's a very polarizing series. I think people either really don't like it or really love it, and that goes even so far as like the individual characters. Like the debates I've seen on Twitter have been wild. The Grisha trilogy takes place in a fantastical world that is inspired by Imperial Russia. There are people called Grisha who have magical abilities, such as being able to summon wind or summon fire or control the body. This story is set in the country of Ravka, where most of the Grisha live, and Ravka is plagued by this thing called the Fold, which is basically a huge expanse of darkness that is full of monsters. We follow our protagonist Alina, who one day finds out that she has Grisha power despite believing her entire life that she was immortal. Not only does she have Grisha power, but she has the power to summon light, which for a country that is plagued by darkness could prove instrumental. And so she is taken into a magical school where she learns how to be a Grisha and how to becomes involved in the politics of this world. Now, I really enjoyed this series. I had a lot of fun with it. Objectively, I can see that there are a lot of problems. It is not a perfect piece of literature. The weakest part of this series was the pacing, mostly just because there would be moments that were slow and then suddenly incredibly fast-paced moments, and there was not substantial development in between, and that was kind of a jarring experience to have, and it just didn't make the story flow nicely. But that being said, it wasn't enough that I hated these books. Like I said, I really enjoyed them. I also think that the setup of the villain was very well done in the beginning. I thought they set it up really well, but the development kind of fell flat for me. There were definitely some good moments, but overall, I thought there was just so much potential that wasn't explored. But something that I really loved was just how much development a lot of our main and side characters went through. Contrary to like the popular opinion, I didn't hate Alina and Mal. Alina kind of started off a little bit wonky, but I really liked her development. And same with Mal, to be honest. I think I didn't necessarily like where they started, but I did like where they ended up, and I could see how much they grew and how much they changed to get where they ended up. I also think a lot of the side characters were really well done. I love them all, and I'm currently reading King of Scars, and I love that we get to see them all again, and we really get to delve into their stories a little more. So yeah, if you want to know more of my thoughts, check out my review, but overall, I really enjoyed it. I would rank them Siege and Storm first, Ruin and Rising second, and Shadow and Bone last. Shadow and Bone was definitely the weakest. So after finishing the Grisha trilogy, I was inspired to pick up the Six of Crows duology again because I missed my babies. The Six of Crows duology also takes place in the Grishaverse, but we follow a different group of kids in a different country. We're in Kurt, which is kind of the merchant capital of the world, and we follow 6 very morally ambiguous characters. And these group of characters come together to perform an impossible heist that could potentially get them a lot of money. That was a very brief description, but I don't know what else to say besides read it. Rereading this series has solidified it in my mind as one of my favorites of all time. It was absolutely fantastic. Loved it so much. Oh my god. What's interesting is that the first time I read this duology, I hadn't read the Grisha trilogy, but now that I have, I actually noticed that Lee Bardugo took a lot of elements that I personally found strong in the Grisha trilogy and like put them on steroids in Six of Crows. Like the character development in the Grisha trilogy does not even compare to how much she developed the characters in Six of Crows. And she developed 6. Like that is a feat in itself. And she really explored people's moral ambiguities and how much their passions and motivations are influenced by their past, and basically what you do when you're not the chosen one. Grisha trilogy was very much a chosen one trope, where then this one kind of flips that on its head. And I absolutely loved it. I keep talking about the characters of Six of Crows, but it's just because that is what I think is the strongest point of this series. The story is pitched as a heist novel, but in reality, you don't care too much about the actual heist. You care about what these characters are going through, what their backstories were, and how their relationships are with each other. Pretty much, you come for the heist, but you stay for the emotionally damaged characters that you can't help but adopt into your soul. This is really not the most intellectual review I could give, but that's what happens when you're so emotionally attached to a series. On that note, let's move on to the next book I read in January, which is Letters to the Lost by Bridget Kemmerer. Now, this was a very impulsive buy and read, but I'm so glad that I did it because I absolutely loved it. I know this probably wouldn't happen, but I wish this was required reading for high school kids because this is a fantastic coming-of-age story. It follows a boy named Declan and a girl named Juliet, who are both dealing with various forms of grief. Juliet's mother has just recently died, and as a way to cope with that, she writes letters to her and leaves them on her grave. Declan one day finds one of these letters and decides to read it, and he finds that he really connects with what the person writing this letter is saying, and he decides to write a response. This kind of catalyzes an anonymous pen pal-ship between the two, and through that connection, they begin to open up about their struggles and basically everything that they've been hiding from the world and keeping to themselves. I didn't realize how much I would fall in love with this story, but I got so invested into both of their characters' developments and their story arcs because they were so honest and real, and I just understood them and I wanted to give them both a hug. I love the way that this book was told a lot through letters between the two, because as both of them got to know each other, you really got to become invested in both their characters individually as well as their relationship. And their connection was so beautiful. And it's not even romantic or based on love or lust. It's essentially just two people connecting about shared struggles and shared inner demons. If you love contemporaries that deal with hard-hitting topics, I would highly recommend this. I wish this book was more popular. It was so good, and I think it was so important too. Hey, so as I was editing, I realized I forgot to mention a few things, primarily one that I need to give a few content warnings, specifically for suicide, depression, and toxic relationships. If those are some things that bother you and could potentially trigger you, then I might suggest not reading this book. There are a few moments that get a little intense. Other than that, I also wanted to give a few more reasons why I really like this novel. One was the portrayal of relationships. For every relationship that kind of was toxic or offered a lot of conflict, they were often foiled by an extremely healthy relationship that was beautifully constructed and beautifully formed, and I fell in love with them. I loved the friendship between Declan and his best friend, as well as Juliet's best friends. I loved the kind of found family parental relationship that Declan had with his boss. That one was absolutely so good, oh my god. And two, in terms of the writing style, at first I was a little turned off by it because it's very blunt, and usually with these hard-hitting novels, they kind of become poetic, but there was actually a poeticism to the bluntness. Like, it was very short, but it packed a huge punch, and I wasn't prepared for it. And I thought it was actually pretty brilliant how she was able to achieve that with the type of writing style that she had. Just as a point of criticism, even though I like this book so much, was that I don't think the two perspectives, like our two main characters, were equally fleshed out. I am framing this kind of wrong. They're both very well done, and I love both of their characters, but Declan's character to me was far more interesting. His chapters were far more gripping, the stakes felt so much higher, whereas Juliet's, I definitely empathize with her, but not to the same extent that I did with Declan. Again, that could have been preference, but I do think there was some sort of flaw in the writing, or just unequal distribution of emotion? Who knows? So those were all the books that I read in January, and also the end to all of my books that I read in the winter, because in February, I read nothing. I was just way too ambitious. I wanted to do the booktube games, I wanted to do Blackathon, and guess who did neither? I did start Becoming by Michelle Obama and King of Scars because I had to, but yeah, I still didn't finish both of them. This month was busy. A lot of my classes started really packing on work. I also got the flu, so there just was not a lot of time for bookish things. Hopefully that'll change in spring, but don't really think so, but we can cross our fingers. Anyway, that's all I have to say about the books I read this winter. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you stay tuned for the next video. Bye!